don't know how we got here, Piers. I'd like to know just as much as anybody else, but all I can think in my head, based on what I've read in the paper, is we got here thanks to Bibi Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, and Mark Levin. And ultimately President Trump. That's not to take agency away from the president, who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible to see through the lies. One way or another, he allowed himself to be pushed into this insane conflict.
Welcome back to Floor Leader Insider. What you are about to see is the moment the MAGA coalition officially fractured on live television. Megyn Kelly, one of the most formidable architects of the America First media landscape, just walked onto Piers Morgan's set and did the unthinkable. She turned on Donald Trump with a level of ferocity we haven't seen from the right in a decade. She didn't just offer a critique, she went for the jugular, calling the president weak, gullible, and too old to realize he was being played. The context here is non-negotiable for anyone trying to understand the current geopolitical fallout. As the dust settles on the Iran conflict, Kelly is pulling back the curtain on a terrifying reality inside the Situation Room. She is documenting a 79-year-old commander-in-chief who, she claims, has become a pawn for Benjamin Netanyahu, swallowing a narrative that has effectively hijacked American foreign policy. Watch how Piers Morgan, the master of the even-handed performance, completely loses control of the interview. He spent years building a brand on being the reasonable centrist who runs cover for the administration, but here he is, caught in the crossfire as a former loyalist burns the ultimate negotiator myth to the ground. This isn't just a heated debate, it's a total collapse of the MAGA establishment's intellectual defense, and Megyn Kelly is the one holding the receipts. Let's dive right into it.
First tonight, I'm joined by Megyn Kelly, host of the Megyn Kelly Show. Megyn, what's been the point of it all?
You got to say, the deal sounds very much like surrender on our part, which I'm in favor of. I mean, great. This needed to end. Ugly or any other way. It needed to end. It was folly to begin with. It was folly throughout. It remains folly. I'm sure Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham were feeling really, really good until the end part where we had to end it. And now they're very, very angry. Mark Levin was practically in tears on Fox News last night because we didn't see it through, I guess, with the nuclear bomb that we were going to drop on Iran. We didn't go in commando style and seize all the uranium. We allowed, according to the Israelis, according to the Iranians, that is, the war against Hezbollah to stop, which he wants seen through. He would love to see Lebanon completely bombed and to be made to look like Gaza. And there was really no point to going forward other than more death and destruction. The Iranians proved to be tough MFers, and they realized that they had something far more powerful than a nuclear bomb. They had control over the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump was warned prior to getting involved in this conflict by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that they were not likely to collapse easily and that they probably would maintain control of the strait and could cause a global economic panic. And he didn't listen. What he did with the Dan Kane warnings was rush to Truth Social, Trump did, saying, all Dan Kane knows how to do is win. And if I tell him to invade, he's going to win. Well, that's not really what happened. There was never any question we could decimate their Navy or their Air Force. Of course, no one would ever second guess the power of the U.S. military. It's pristine and it's impeccable and it's truly awe-striking. But these battles in the Middle East have been fought now for 20 plus years, and we continue to learn the same lesson over and over. It is not their overwhelming air power or their incredible navies that keep us mired in quagmires. It's their insurgencies. It's this disparate way of fighting that we don't know how to handle. We can't tamp down with the amazing power of an aircraft carrier, which, by the way, we had trouble getting anywhere close there after they figured out how to attack it. And, we've already learned this. Trump watched us learn it. And so what led Trump, at 79 years old, to sit in there in that Situation Room when Bibi Netanyahu was seated as an equal? Yeah. Trump didn't even sit at the head of the table. Trump sat at the side of the table, and Bibi was across from him as an equal in the American Situation Room. What led him to sit there and buy what that guy was selling hook, line, and sinker when every other president was able to see through that liar? What was it? Because he was told the next day by our own top advisors, from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to the Secretary of State to the vice president, that these are lies and that these objectives are not going to be attainable. Don't believe him. We might be able to wipe out the Ayatollah, not regime change, Ayatollah. And we might be able to decimate some portion of their missiles and their military. Okay, that's true. But the goals as stated by Trump when we actually did pull the trigger were all over the board. And to this moment, he's pushing the BS claim that we affected regime change. No, we didn't. It's the same regime, just different players. There isn't somebody more moderate in there at all. We have no reason to believe that. In fact, it looks like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is in control now, which is far more radical. And the fatwa that had allegedly been issued by the Ayatollah on developing nukes is gone. Iran is more powerful economically. It controls the strait and now is demanding the lifting of all sanctions against it. And what Trump did with that 10-point plan was go from Monday saying, no, not good, to Tuesday saying, very workable, we can do it, as a means of saving face to bail off of his insane threats about annihilating an entire civilization. So I don't know how we got here, Piers. I'd like to know just as much as anybody else, but all I can think in my head, based on what I've read in the paper, is we got here thanks to Bibi Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, and Mark Levin. And ultimately President Trump. That's not to take agency away from the president, who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible to see through the lies. One way or another, he allowed himself to be pushed into this insane conflict that caused, forget, the blood and treasure we spilled. As you point out, at least 15 service personnel, I believe, were being lied to about the total number of dead and wounded. But we don't know what the accurate death toll in Iran is. How many civilians in Iran died? How many died in our allies around Iran who now don't trust us? What penalty do we pay other than the cost and the 15 lives that we expended, which count for a lot? But we didn't take the brunt of Iran's response. Our allies did, with whom we did not consult prior to starting this war, who are very, very angry, many of them, about what was done to them. What's going to happen to the trillions of dollars Trump was touting that they donated? They were offered to donate to the United States just to be nice guys and have great relations. You think they're going to spend that on us now? They're going to spend it on themselves. They've got to rebuild massive portions of their own countries thanks to the bombing campaign unleashed against them, because they were within reach, by Iran, who couldn't reach us. So we've upset our allies. We've pleased Israel, although now they're upset that there's a ceasefire. We've upset the American base. The Trump coalition that got him elected is completely fractured and in smithereens. And he doesn't care, Piers, because he doesn't care about the Republican Party. He cares about himself. If Trump had to get reelected, he probably would have handled this a little differently. But he doesn't care that the Republicans are going to lose the midterms. I think he thought that was a foregone conclusion. And I don't think he cares that J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio wins the presidency next time around. I think there's a piece of Trump that would like to say, I'm the only one who could do it. The Republican Party's nothing without me. And the rest of us are going to be around to pick up the pieces.
I mean, a fascinating assessment. I mean, I remember early on you picking up, as I did, on what Rubio had said about the reason why America went in. And then the immediate backtracking the next day when they panicked and realized they'd let the cat out of the bag. This was clearly a Netanyahu-driven operation. He had persuaded Trump to come with him. Then we had Antony Blinken saying, well, actually, he tried to do this when Biden was president, when Obama was president, and both times those two guys said, no, we're not going to come with you. And then he didn't attack. So he clearly got third time lucky with an American president that would come with him. But I remember early on, you and I and others who dared to suggest that we take Rubio at his word, that actually this was all at Israel's behest. Once again, we were anti-Semitic if we said that. This was a hatred of Israel that was driving our warped, crazed minds. And then you read this deep dive in the New York Times. Fascinating. I mean, what's most fascinating to me, they've got somebody on the inside telling them exactly what happened in that situation room, which is fascinating. But when you see it all laid out, it's crystal clear. That's exactly what happened. That Netanyahu got in that situation room at the White House, like you say, unprecedented. The way he had the guy from Mossad on the big screen, he had him there with his... It was like two equal partners. and he persuaded Trump in that room to go in. And I think Trump will regret this. Well, you're right. He may not care. He may want to just say, moving on, it's a big victory, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is nobody thinks this was a big victory for the United States. Nobody can see anything but actually a bit of a humiliation, not militarily, because America can beat anyone when it comes to a military punch-up. But what Iran has now discovered is that as long as it can control the Strait of Hormuz, it can control the global economy, and therefore it can, if it has enough patience, play out the long game with the President of the United States, who will have to cave, because ultimately it's going to cause him so much economic and political damage, he has no choice. That's what's happened here. Trump hasn't brought this to an end out of some great desire for peace. He's brought it to an end because he could see that the economic and political damage was getting worse by the day.
Because the Iranians wouldn't fold. They realized what the pressure point was and that it was working. And they watched Trump's poll numbers spiral downward in every piece of the coalition that elected him. And they realized that their ability to just withstand the beating was working, was getting them to where they needed to get. Because, look, there was never majority support behind this war. There wasn't some groundswell of support behind this war, right? There was a Republican-based support for the war, but the Democrats didn't support it. The independents didn't support it. And very soon into the war, the Republicans stopped supporting it too. MAGA supported it. As MAGA dwindled, by the way, it was already only about 15% of the population. It's getting smaller by the day. President Trump 3 weeks ago declared that to be MAGA, you have to support Mark Levin, upon which multiple formerly diehard MAGA people who are dedicated to it said, I'm out. If those are the stakes, I'm out. Why would I support that warmonger who's frothing at the mouth over the idea of lives being cost in Iran, civilian or otherwise? He's a disgusting fool who's well past his prime. We should not be listening to him, but President Trump is obsessed. On Sunday, he tweeted out that the Supreme Court should be listening to Mark Levin.
I know.
All nine justices, which would double his viewership.
Yeah, I don't get it because you've been loudly calling out the folly of this war from day one. I have, Tucker has, Candace Owens has, Joe Rogan has, Theo Von has. I mean, there is a massive cross-section of people in our world, which is what I call the unfiltered world, where you're not controlled perhaps by other forces that own networks and so on, that sort of send out a directive about what you should and shouldn't be saying. So in the free spirit world, where you can say what you really think, pretty much everyone has been agreed. This looked like madness. There's a very interesting piece, I think, with Stephen Chung pops up in the New York Times piece, who emerges as one of the smarter characters, actually, that Trump has around him, who said, well, how does all this sit with we're not going to go and wage war in the Middle East, which is what we campaigned on? How does this sit with America first? This will have an obvious effect on prices, on inflation, on gas pump costs and so on. How does any of this work? And there's no real answer, according to New York Times, in the room to that. He just raises this spectre of, this is the elephant in the room. This is exactly the opposite to what we campaigned on. So I think politically it's been disastrous for Donald Trump. And I just don't understand, other than he got bamboozled by Netanyahu, why he took such a gigantic risk.
I don't either. And it wasn't just Steve Chung, who is a master messenger and saw the storm coming. It was J.D. Vance, who, according to the New York Times, was in there specifically saying it's going to fracture the coalition. And boy, is that an understatement. Trump is now underwater, and he wasn't before, with men. Don't forget the gender divide that happened in 2024. The women went overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris, and men went for Trump. Now he's underwater with men, including with young men and young people. The young person coalition that Charlie Kirk delivered to the president is gone. They've abandoned Donald Trump. The working class, Piers. The latest poll that just came out showed he's 2 points underwater with the working class. That's been Trump's base from the beginning. They were the unshakable foundation that got him elected over and over. And they're gone. They're very angry. They care about what's happening in Iowa, not Iran. They don't want days and days and more weeks of debates over the Strait of Hormuz. No one cares. They care about their own lives. They care about the fact that they can't pay for health care. They can't buy a home Young people cannot get a home even though two people are working nonstop, round the clock with no vacations in this country. President Trump promised he would do something about that. Now we see the leaked soundbite saying, can't really worry about anything at the federal government level other than military. Everything else has to be done at the state. Then they pulled that down off the internet because they didn't mean to share it. He said it at an Easter breakfast that was supposed to be private. Well, it's going to be the campaign ad for every Democrat in these midterms. So he's lost working class, he's lost men, he's lost young people, he lost Hispanics by some 50 points. Every single gain with Hispanics is now gone. It's eradicated. Blacks, he had made some inroads with black voters. Done. You name it, they're all gone. The question is now not who has he lost, the question is who remains. And sure, it's the diehard MAGA, Trump can do no wrong, he's some savant, whatever he says is right. That's great. He'll always have those people. You can't win national elections with some fraction of 15% of the electorate. The vast majority of Republicans would call themselves America First, but not necessarily MAGA, certainly not the way Trump is now defining that term. And he misunderstood his own base twice critically in the past year, and both times are really undermining him right now. One was Epstein, thinking he could just say, Epstein, who still cares about that? No one's talking about Epstein. He misread the base, which very much cared about Epstein, not so much because they care about Jeffrey Epstein, but they care about elites being able to get away with murder and protect each other when the common man cannot. And the unwillingness to turn over stones that the base had been demanding be turned over so we could figure out, is there some sort of child predator sex ring? Is there an elite cabal working to hurt people that gets protected because they have money and we don't? And Trump could not get rid of that with a shrug of a shoulder. And ultimately it resulted in legislation he had to pretend he favored that was crammed down his throat and he had to sign, though it had enough loopholes in it to drive a Mack truck through. But in any event, it was a step forward on Epstein that he didn't want to make and was forced to. And this is the second one. And this is a much, much bigger and more serious betrayal of what he ran on and of what was important to his base, which does include the America Firsters and not just MAGA. Or as Marjorie Taylor Greene has been saying, at this point, she's not America First, she's America only. And I think a lot of us are getting to that point. We are sick of being the policemen of the world, of being dragged into conflict after conflict by Bibi Netanyahu, by Israel, who's supposed to be our special ally, but in what they're special at is getting us to fight their wars and get involved in their conflicts that they can't fight by themselves. That's what Dan Kane said to President Trump the day after Netanyahu came for the 7th time and was sitting in that situation room like an equal. He said that they're great on intelligence. That's supposed to be the area in which they're so special to us. They share their intelligence. They're great on it. But that intelligence doesn't always seem to pan out. Like, the regime will fall easily. The Iranian people will revolt in the streets and take over. With how? They don't have guns. Bombs would be raining down. Wasn't this thought through? There isn't regime change. The Iranian people are arguably worse off than they were before. And it's all based on Bibi Netanyahu's special intelligence, which cost at least 15 American lives, the fracturing of the Trump coalition, probably at least the next 2 elections for Republicans, not to mention the amount of lives and blood and treasure that was spilled in the Middle East. So great job.
Let's be extremely clear about what we just witnessed, because this exchange is the definitive proof that the both sides circus has officially hit a dead end. For years, the American public was sold a very specific brand of strength. We were told that Donald Trump was the only leader capable of standing up to foreign interests and putting America first. But here is Megyn Kelly, someone who has lived, breathed, and sold that narrative, telling you to your face that the president was too weak to say no when the stakes were highest. She is describing a commander-in-chief who sat in the Situation Room and was manipulated into a massive geopolitical disaster because he was too gullible to verify the facts. This is the ultimate institutional failure. And look at Piers Morgan's response. When the truth gets too heavy, he retreats into his usual procedural whining, complaining about the tone rather than addressing the terrifying substance of the argument. This is the textbook definition of Trump denial syndrome. It is the psychological refusal to acknowledge that the strong man you've defended for years has become a strategic liability. Megyn Kelly is exposing a reality that many in the media are still too afraid to touch: the intersection of cognitive decline, age, and a desperate need for approval from foreign leaders. The result is a shredded American credibility on the global stage. The MAGA movement is fracturing because you cannot build a foundation on performance and expect it to hold when actual history starts happening. The receipts are finally in. The ultimate negotiator has been exposed as a pawn, and the media figures who ran cover for him are left stuttering on their own sets. The performance is over, and the reality is far uglier than any of them are willing to admit. If you are tired of the corporate media running cover for power and you want political analysis that actually has the backbone to follow the facts, you need to be part of this community. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and join Floor Leader Insider. We don't do both sides nonsense here. We celebrate the moments where the circus gets exposed. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and help us spread the truth that the mainstream media is trying to bury.